From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hello, everybody. This is Kate Morton with WisPolitics.com here with a Capital Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. Today I'm here with my colleague Adam Kellenhofer to talk about an interview he did with Department of Safety and Professional Services Secretary Dan Hereth. So, Adam, tell us about the interview.
Hi, Kate. Yeah, I got to catch up with Secretary Dan Hereth to talk about some of the issues that he's been working on resolving at the Department of Safety and Professional Services. Most of those issues involve a backlog of licenses that kind of culminated during the pandemic. There were a lot of issues that were kind of coming to term before the pandemic, but the pandemic really kind of put the screws on. So let's just hear what he had to say about addressing that issue. Today, I am joined by the Department of Safety and Professional Services Secretary, Dan Hereth, to talk about some of the improvements on the licensing front at the DSPS, because during the pandemic, there were some issues with licensing delays, and a lot of people called it a backlog, but things have been improving. I listened to your Joint Finance Committee testimony, and it sounds like the backlog has at least been improved or completely gone away. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly like all businesses or industries, we faced pressures during the pandemic. We inside of less than a month, we stood up a pandemic-related licensing process, commonly referred to as an Act 10 license, which allowed flexibilities for our healthcare workers throughout the state. That was on top of a national trend of increasing licensure. Over the last really over the last 70 years, licensing has been increasing, but certainly over the last 10 years, our license volume has more than doubled. And in fact, over the last 8 years specifically, we have 49 new credentials that have been added to the department as licensed occupations. So really, just a definite increase in growth in the demand, and alongside aging processes, right? For the better part of the last 20 years, we certainly had a level of austerity throughout government, and haven't necessarily invested in the people, the processes, and the technology necessary to operate in a modern age. And so for us, coming out of that, trying to address those things was really about meeting our customers, our constituents, where they're at. And that's with a modern platform, a cloud-based platform that is mobile ready, that really, in many ways, puts them in the driver's seat of the process. Certainly happy to get into that a little bit more, but I don't know how weedy you want to get here.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely talk about, anything that's like kind of improved the process here, and like how we're speeding things along and making sure people get their licenses approved and everything, if they deserve it, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, that's I do want to kind of stop there for a minute and talk about how our goal is to license qualified applicants as quickly and as seamlessly as possible. And as you can imagine, dealing with over 240 different license types is really like having over 240 different assembly lines, and all with different suppliers that have inputs into the process, whether that's educational institutions, employers, applicants themselves. And so how do we centralize a lot of that capability, automate some of it, certainly make some of it more direct in terms of technological communication between the department and national testing organizations or educational institutions. And then how do we ensure that we keep the safety piece, right, first and foremost in that discussion? I don't know if you know this right now, but there's actually a national investigation into nursing transcript fraud. And so there have been instances across the country of nurses who've been on the floor who haven't necessarily been educated to the standards that are held throughout the nation. And so that's obviously a big safety concern and something that we at the department take very seriously. And so while we're highly focused on technological improvement and automation, we want to make sure that those high value pieces of the process, the parts that really truly keep people safe, remain a core component of the work that we do. In terms of the technology, I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really about putting people in the driver's seat. It means that the applicant is completing a lot of the data entry directly, so that we're not transcribing, taking handwritten forms and trying to transcribe them into the system. So that alone saves lots of work and lots of high reduction in error. And then it takes it to a place where instead of I call it first in, first out. So I grew up working in restaurants, and while that's good for rotating food stock, that's not necessarily the most efficient and effective way to process licenses. And so for us, the focus really needed to be on the applicants that were most active in the process, and how quickly could we move through returning and responding to their inputs to the process. So if they submit a new piece of documentation that moves them along the licensing process, how quickly can we respond to them and say, hey, yeah, that's right, or wait a minute, it's not quite what we need. Go back and get this additional information so that we can check this requirement off of your list. And so it's expediting that discussion and really putting our focus on those people who are highly engaged in our process. That has led to our improvements overall. But I think to talk a little bit about our budget request, one of the critical pieces of the process really is that human connection. And so as much as I'm a big fan of automating the parts that should be automated and making things as technologically friendly as possible, the reality is for us, 65-70% of people move extremely fast through our new process. Warp speed if you're a Star Trek fan. But we have that other cohort that 25-30% of folks that just need additional assistance, whether it's they don't understand something, or that maybe they're not going through a non-traditional process, as many of our licenses have multiple pathways to enter the profession, not necessarily a specific degree program or a specific type of education, but more a culmination of their experiences. That's great for Wisconsin. That's flexibility that we need to get people into the workforce, but it makes the process more complex, and it makes things sometimes more confusing for our applicants. And we need people to be able to assist those applicants when they need that assistance, and really take that 20-30% that aren't a part of the Warp Speed group and move them into the Warp Speed group. And so that's what this budget's about. We've asked for a number of additional processing staff. We've asked for a number of additional call center staff. You mentioned you listened to our JFC testimony.
Yep.
And I talked very candidly about the fact that we had to hire 22 contract staff with federal funding in order to take our call answer rate from 37% to 97%. So we have 6 FTE answering 5,000 to 10,000 phone calls a week. That math simply doesn't work. And so if you do the short math on it, the back of the envelope math, 6 people got us 37%. It took additional 22 contract staff, who, by the way, are more expensive on an annual basis, to get us to a 97% answer rate. And in my experience, full-time staff have a higher level of ability. They build a better bank of knowledge to answer questions, again, about 240 different license types. That's not something that you can learn as a contract staff, no matter how good you are, overnight. And so 14 additional call center staff, FTE in our budget to be able to answer those questions when people call. And then 16 additional processing staff. And those processing staff are really about meeting our customers where they're at and creating a direct link between the applicant and our customers. As we sit here today, if I ask our license review staff to focus on responding to customer calls, for every call they took, it'd be 5 licenses they didn't review. And so, but at the end of the day, the most efficient and effective way to answer questions is for the person who's actually reviewing your application to be able to talk to you. And so by adding those 16 additional processing staff, it allows us to distribute the work in a way that we can create a more direct line of communication between the applicant and the person reviewing their application. Because at the end of the day, this is really all about Wisconsin's workforce and making sure that we're getting people efficiently and effectively into that workforce while keeping the citizens of Wisconsin safe. I mentioned also in that JFC hearing that Wisconsin is currently, from a timing perspective, our averages are currently right in line with some of our sister states in Illinois and Michigan. But at the end of the day, I don't want to, and I know this isn't a football podcast, but I don't want to just be the same as Illinois and Michigan. I want to beat Illinois. I want to beat Michigan, because we really are, in a sense, in a war for workers. As demand for educated, licensed professionals increases, and population is sort of at a flat point throughout the nation. It really is going to take everything and everybody contributing to attract new workers, and quite honestly, keep our workers here, keep our young folks graduating just this last couple of weekends in jobs here in the state of Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of those. There's a lot of licenses out there, and it's only kind of been increasing over time. Are there any kind of areas or professions you can see for kind of condensing that number of licenses, or getting rid of some license requirements, or kind of just condensing the process, I guess?
Yeah, I think condensing is a really key word. So about a week into my tenure as secretary, one of the first things I did was meet with our nursing board chair. And we had a requirement that said you have to review all of these graduation documents before you can authorize these students to take their national examination. And so for us, obviously, we're not going to issue a license until somebody has demonstrated that they've graduated from an appropriate course of study. But should we delay them from taking their national exams because we have to go one by one and review their graduation certificate at that time? I felt, and the nursing board thankfully felt, that the answer was no. If we take them at their word and they tell us they're graduating on May 16th, on the day after May 16th, let's automatically approve them to take their national exams. And then during that 3 to 4 week period where they're scheduling those exams, studying for those exams, taking those exams, we can then review that documentation, and we can review other documentation to really maximize the process. So you said condense, and what I hear is taking an iterative process and making it concurrent, right? So making as many steps in the process as concurrent as possible. As it relates to some of the requirements for licensing, that's certainly within the purview of our boards as well as our legislature. And I think it's always good to be evaluating these things to ensure that we're only instituting the latest national standards, and that we're doing the things in the process that keep people safe. Because at the end of the day, I always say, and I think I stole it from a Granger commercial, but safety's in our name, right? And so if we're not keeping that first and foremost in our mind, we're not really doing the citizens the justice they deserve. And so while we're all in on technology, we're all in on making sure that we're resourced in a way that makes this process the best process in the nation. We will always continue to make sure that we're keeping people safe as a part of it as well.
Yeah. So you've talked a lot about, or a little bit, I guess, about the budget. The budget is a huge document, so it's kind of hard to fit it all in this one podcast. But is there any kind of separate legislation you would like to see to kind of help speed licensing along?
Yeah, there's been a number of pieces of legislation I know flowing through the legislature, and I certainly have some ideas. I've had very good conversations with some of the key legislators, including Representative Sortwell and others, around how we feel about some of the legislation. Obviously, there are pieces of some of them that we like, and there are pieces of some of them that we don't like, but it's just a matter of sort of moving through that process. I know in particular today there's coming up in a hearing is a bill to adjust renewal times. We've expressed that we certainly have an interest in having that discussion, and that There are concerns that arise as a part of making those type of adjustments, but we feel that we can work together to mitigate some of those concerns and get to a place where it could provide benefit to the process, as well as continue to keep the citizens of Wisconsin safe.
All right. Well, I think that's all I have time for today. So thank you very much for joining me on today's podcast.
Happy to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to connecting in the future.
Thanks for sharing that interview, Adam. So if our listeners want to check out more about these budget discussions, they can head to our budget blog at wispolitics.com.
That's right, Kate. But for now, I'm Adam Kellenhofer.
I'm Kate Morton.
Thanks for tuning in to Capital Chats, brought to you by Spectrum.